All right, we should be live now.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is 4:30, 2021, like called Public Works Committee of the City of Outfall to order and acknowledge to the press and public who do and duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. I'll entertain a motion for approval of a previous meeting minutes of March 3rd, 2021 at this time.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion, deletions, additions? Here none, all in favor? Aye. Citizen comments? There are none. We'll go directly to department report. Director Phibbs.
Good afternoon. Month of March, the garbage collection was about normal. I can't see that it being way up at the end of April. However, the yard debris, we're up almost 100 tons on March. That was highly unusual over quite a few years. 39.18 tons of miscellaneous debris, about normal. For March, that's normally your house cleanup type, spring cleaning. Vehicle maintenance, you can see the one big hit for the PW26, one of my newer trucks. And it was the regeneration unit failed. That's on your newer, all of your newer vehicles. So that was the $12,000 hit I was worried about. We have another one that's going to be about $8,000 for a turbo. So Murphy has hit the Public Works Department in the maintenance issue, but we're getting close to the end of the year. See what we can do to manage the remainder. If there's any questions, I'm going to turn it over to Robert.
I just have a question about fuel prices. You know, we're taking a hit right now. Are you seeing any difference, Donnie? You think it's gonna affect your bottom line in year end, sir?
I think the thing we may be too liberal in what I told you last month. That number that Debbie said we need to go up a little bit more, but I will talk to Sell Oil before next Tuesday and make sure you get that word.
Yeah. Well, we got 2.5 months.
We're watching it, but I think we probably should have went a little bit higher.
All right. Going on. Generated.
staff going up there, cleaning up trash and debris. We've also been removing some of the ROC from the big lot and moving here to City Hall, also to Public Works, to try to get some more parking spaces up in the big lot. We also had the concrete aprons around the drop inlets at Municipal Lot, that's Municipal Lot A, the gravel lot that was filling in with gravel. That's complete and that system is working. We've also met with our landscape contractor to update the maintenance for Palm Boulevard due to SCDOT's parking plan on Palm. We had to clean, Public Works cleaned up, remove brush from Breach Inlet before SCDOT came and did the expansion to the parking lot. We've also did the city-owned compactor. We had to do some service on that, did PM, and just usual USD testing, the Marina, Public Works, Public Safety. That's about it. Any questions?
Yes, sir, I have one.
Sure.
Is there been any more clarification or less confusion about the parallel parking and breach inlet since y'all put the signs up?
Since we put the signs up, no, everybody parked correctly. The other day that we didn't have the signs,
Yeah.
it was all over, but that's
Right.
yeah, that's great.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else?
Yeah, just one, Mr. Chair. More comment than anything. I know this happened in April, but the repair of the lights down at the marina.
Yes.
Well, number one, it's great that you all got that done, but it was also really good service that you got out as quickly as you did.
Right.
And we had the tenants, not the tenants, the homeowners that were nearby that were
Yeah, when
having
they
interference in the light itself.
Yeah, when they set up the lights, they weren't sure because obviously they have to be there at night. So the good contractor came back the next day, adjusted them, and we were fine. And that was a part of the parking lot. Those lights hadn't worked in years, so it's more of a safety concern. That's why we really wanted to get those back up and running. Like that park on that. Thank you.
Move right along to old business. Item A, update on phase 3 drainage projects, small internal projects in the Waterways Boulevard path elevation presented by Thomas and Hutton. Y'all with Thomas and Hutton?
Yes, sir.
Come forward and give us your name.
Pull it out, you don't have to take the whole thing.
Good afternoon. I am Hillary Aton. I'm a project manager with Thomas and Hutton. I'm here with Rick Karkowski, who's our Water Resources Department manager. And we're going to give you an update on those phase 3 drainage projects.
Give me just a second. There we go.
And are you going to operate or?
Just let me know when to change it.
Okay, so I'm sure you're all familiar with these outfall projects, but we're just going to give you a quick update on where we stand with the outfall project as well as the Waterway Boulevard pathway study. Next slide. So So we're going to give you an overview of the 3 outfall projects themselves, where we stand with permitting. We'll touch on the mitigation, and then we'll get into the Waterway Boulevard pathway study. We'll give you a quick summary of the findings, our recommendations, and the cost estimate. So just a quick overview, the red boundary is our phase 3 study area. And you can see it's located in the center of the island. That boundary was delineated into 3 outfall basins, 3 individual outfalls, all of which outfall to the intercoastal waterway. It's the 30th Avenue Outfall, the Forest Trail Outfall, and the 41st Avenue Outfall. Starting with the 30th Avenue Outfall, this is an aerial view of the project limits. It shows our existing conditions survey. The existing drainage goes under Waterway Boulevard, and then it's an open channel all the way out to the intercoastal waterway. These are a couple of pictures of the existing conditions. As you can see, the outfall channel between the homes on Waterway Boulevard is very steep with limited access for the city to maintain the system. And then further downstream, the channel becomes very narrow and has limited capacity. So here's a plan view of our proposed improvements, and this is actually flowing from right to left. So under Waterway Boulevard, we're replacing a 24 and a 36-inch pipe with an 8-foot by 4-foot box. From there, we're going to pipe that existing channel between the houses and then under the fairway, where it's going to discharge to a much wider, improved and deepened channel. So this piping this channel between the houses is going to provide maintenance access for the city's contractor to get to the system and be able to maintain it downstream. This is a profile view of the system. What we're planning on proposing are sluice gates so that city can close the system off and maintain it in the dry, and also check valves. Those check valves are going to prevent any tidal influence from coming up into the system and producing sunny day flooding. The 30th Avenue outfall design is complete. The critical area permits, we have 2, one for infrastructure and one for the channel. Those have both been submitted and coordination is ongoing. We've submitted a DOT encroachment permit and we have addressed comments there. We have also completed applications for Charleston County MS4 and DHEC, CZC, and NPDES permits. Moving on to the next outfall, the Forest Trails outfall. This is an
Excuse me
aerial
just a minute,
view.
can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Is that all right? Here. Sure.
Of
Yeah,
course.
on the 30th Avenue outfall and it runs across the fairway there, is that gonna be closed in now or will that still be an open ditch?
It will be piped and closed in.
Piped and closed in.
Mhm.
I won't have any more golf balls. That's good.
One benefit.
And we also, we had to have some discussion with Wild Dunes about that too, didn't we? So we got that worked out?
We are still coordinating with Wild Dunes on getting the easements necessary for that maintenance access shelf. I believe the Wild Dunes legal team is reviewing those easement documents currently, but we expect that to be coming along very soon.
Okay, so that's still a work in progress.
It is.
All right.
But they've been receptive and
Yes,
working with us. on that.
yes, they've been working with us, and we have had several meetings with them, and I think things are going very well. So Forest Trail Outfall, this is located in the center of the island. It was the largest basin. This is currently served by a single 54-inch pipe under Waterway Boulevard, and then it opens up to a pretty wide marshy tidal area downstream. Next slide. These again are pictures of the existing conditions. This is looking downstream towards the golf course and the intercoastal, and this is looking upstream of the canal through the middle of the island. So in our proposed plan, we're going to replace that single 54 with 3 54-inch pipes. There's going to be a retaining wall on the upstream end, a control structure with wing walls, and a deeper channel on the downstream end. So providing much more capacity for this system. Next slide. And again, here we're going to be installing sluice gates for maintenance purposes and also a check valve, which will prevent sunny day flooding upstream for all those homes located along that canal. Those check valves will also help preserve some of the storage in the system so that when we have a major rainfall event occurring at the same time as a high tide, we're going to have much more storage for that rainfall in our system. So for the Forest Trail Outfall, the design is also complete. The infrastructure permit, critical area permit has been approved. The channel critical area permit is still ongoing. We have submitted the DOT encroachment permit and are continuing coordination there. We've also submitted the county MS4 and DHEC, CZC, and NPD as permits. Those are pending approval of the MS4 permit. The last outfall is the 41st Avenue Outfall down by the Marina. This again is an aerial view with the existing conditions overlaid. We currently have a 24-inch pipe under Waterway Boulevard and then an open tidal channel all the way out to the intercoastal waterway. And this may be a little difficult to see. Again, it's a opposite orientation. We're flowing from right to left here with the intercoastal waterway on the left side. We're putting a control structure at the most downstream end. That control structure is going to house those sluice gates and the check valves. Those check valves are going to cut off tidal influence for the entire 41st Avenue ditch. And we're also improving the pipes under Waterway Boulevard. Next slide. So these are our profile views. Again, the sluice gates and the check valves at the most downstream end by the intercoastal, and then the improved pipes under Waterway Boulevard. And from there, we're going from an existing 24-inch pipe to dual 42 pipes under Waterway Boulevard.
Remind me whether that's going to be, I don't believe that's going to be covered up initially, the ditch.
Right, it's going to remain open for now, but the permitting process that we're going through to cut off that tidal flow will aid the city in future efforts to potentially fill and pipe that ditch.
And if we did, that could be substantial enough to use that for maybe parking or other uses?
Yes, so piping the ditch, it will be traffic loading, you'll be able to park on it, drive on it. So that can be used for parking area or whatever the city may
Or like
desire.
a recreational area with picnic tables, that kind of thing.
Correct, yep. So the 41st Avenue Outfall design is also complete. So all three outfall projects are completely designed, and we're in the permitting process for all three, just various stages of permitting. So all of the permits for 41st Avenue are in process. We haven't made these submittals yet, but we will be doing so very soon. For 31st Avenue, because the tidal inflow is being cut off at the most downstream end, we only have one critical area permit for that ditch. And again, we've completed all these applications and hope to be submitting those very soon. Next slide. So we have submitted a change order to the city, and that change order is going to cover additional permitting services, mitigation, and funding assistance. So the permitting, rather than our initial thoughts of submitting a critical area permit for each outfall, we ended up submitting 5 critical area permits, and this was because the infrastructure and channel work on 30th and Forest Trail, if we split those up, it allowed us to minimize the amount of mitigation that was going to be required. And mitigation, that was excluded from our original design contract, but we intend to propose oyster reef restoration as the mitigation alternative. And we're investigating the potential for donations through the SCORE program for funding. And then funding assistance, so we have already submitted 2 different RIA grants, and we actually intend to submit a third later this year. So all 3 of these items are what's included on the change order. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rick.
A follow-up question, well, just on the mitigation, can you explain a little bit more about where those, like the oyster restoration, would that be in the vicinity of that area or?
Yes, so we were thinking, and we haven't developed the plan yet, but the idea was that it would be along the intercoastal waterway at the downstream end of these projects, and it would help restore those banks. And do you have any further detail on that?
Well, I think, we had some
pretty good conversations with we had some pretty good conversations with Wild Dunes, and they seemed pretty excited about the opportunity to have a brief restoration on there. Number one, because it would provide mitigation. Number two, it would protect their banks in the future by, I know there's a lot of erosion in that area. So like a good oyster route back down through there, not only, will create some more marshland and some oysters, but also protect the banks into the future. So there's some excitement there, but there's a lot of work to go on that. And that's kind of the purpose of the change order that we're looking for.
And the spore mitigation project, could you expand on that a little?
That's a program that the DNR runs where they individually themselves go out and do oyster restoration. And they go out and recycle oysters, and we would just pay into that program a certain amount of money that would be the mitigation for this project. And then, so it's either going to be the oysters on the bank or a donation to this, or a donation, but a fee to this program.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I'm going to handle the next sections. Well, I did one before we moved on. Well, one other thing that I think we didn't mention, though, is the schedule of construction. So the first project that's out in front of all the other ones is the Forest Trail Outfall. That's going to be ready in the fall. So we plan to go to bidding in the fall on that project. And have them start, it's funded. I know the bonds and all that. So that's ready to go. That will be ready to go. Then soon on the heels of that would be the 30th Street Outfall, and then the next fiscal year would be the 41st Outfall. So that's our plan on the construction of the project. So that's moving fairly well. And then just a quick update. We don't have any slides on it, but on the internal drainage projects, I believe there were 7 locations that we had improvements at. 2 of them are in, 3 of them are in, I believe. And then we are continuing to work on the other 4 sites. The biggest site we're saving the biggest for the last. There has been a couple hiccups with the contractor, but they are getting through it, and it's kind of going to plan pretty much. But they're probably a little bit behind schedule. We hope to push them along, and they're supposed to be done in a month. But there's some doubts there.
And when you say that they're in or they're done, you mean the construction and everything?
Well, no, I mean the majority of the work is done. So like the 2 culverts on 41st are done. The one closest to Waterway Boulevard, and then the one farthest away from Waterway Boulevard, leaving one actually in the middle that's still to go. 32nd is
Forest Trail internal.
Forest Trail internal has gotten done. And what's the one, the 32nd?
Ross is doing now.
Crossland now.
And then 32nd.
36th. Okay. But they got it's a main contractor and a water and sewer sub. So they've kind of been working through it. The contractors had a little bit of problem with the water and sewer sub, but we're pushing them to rein them in and get focused and get this stuff done.
And will we see some early success with those initial projects, or will we have to kind of wait until the outfalls are all complete to really see the big picture?
I mean, you should see some success. I mean, some of those homes, back up, in the Forest Trail area, certainly should see some improvements with those electric pipes. But Sparrow Drive being one, and then, but of course, everybody's going to see huge difference with outfalls.
Great.
All right. And then I'm going to give a briefing on a study we did, the Waterway Boulevard Pathway Study. And this was a study we did to look at, knowing that the pathway was going to be repaved and maybe worked on a little bit, that we might want to take that opportunity to see what we can do to the pathway to provide some protection to the back of the island from tidal inundation. So that was kind of the charge. And then what we did is a little bit of data collection and review.
where we looked at Charleston County LiDAR. We really looked out at Charleston County published some really good LiDAR, which is a topographic survey essentially. Went back to some of our previous Isle of Palm and Isle of Palm Water and Sewer projects where we have actually done some design on Waterway Boulevard for various water lines and sewer force mains and things like that. And then we did some studies on the tides, how the tides are here and how they're changing a little bit. We did a engineering analysis on that data, looking at the surface, looking at where inundation was happening across the pathway, or how water would move over the pathway. We looked at the drainage system, because one of the pathways for water to intrude into the island is in the drainage system underneath the pathway. Once we kind of got all that together and kind of skipped to recommended, we did come up with a recommendation of a 6-foot target, which is a 9.14 foot gauge. So when we say that 8.0 tide, we're a foot above 8.0 tide. So just you guys on the tide. We did a preliminary design concept. We took that preliminary design concept and went out in the field with city staff and looked at a couple things and kind of walked it and made some changes and some adjustments from that. And once we had that, we finalized the plan. We came up with the cost estimate. So that's what we're talking about. Next slide. So again, Charleston Harbor Tides that's the closest long-term gauge. That's been going since like the 1890s. So we have a really good long-term record there. We know it is increasing, and we know it is just getting worse. So here's a record from 1980 to 2019, and these are some of the elevations that we looked at targeting. So 5, we brought all the trail up the pathway of elevation 5, 5.5, 6, 6.5, and 7. You kind of can see once you get past 5.5, 6, you're only talking about 1 or 2 occurrences over this 40-year span that we would have had intrusion in there. So you start getting a diminishing return. Next slide.
And is that one Spike Hugo?
That is Hugo, of course. Yeah, that's 1989 on this side. That's Hugo. Of course, nobody could really do much about that. But so when we looked at all this analysis and all this data, the 25-year design is a good, solid design. Our drainage projects are designed at 25-year. It's called a 25-year return storm, but that's a 4% chance in any one given year that elevation would be exceeded. So, it's a risk. It's a risk type decision. So we have a 4% chance. So the target that we chose, which is that 6.0 target, still leaves us with a chance, that's 4% every year, that it may flood above that height. And then what we do may be exceeded. But again, that's right now it's a given that's going to flood. So it's a 100% chance that it's going to flood. So we're going from 100 to 4%.
And if it exceeds the threshold, there's no protection? I mean, there's no difference in protection, or does it still give you some protection?
When we're talking about tides that high, it's probably a tropical storm, tropical system, and it's really not, depending on how long the tides are up, it may, we might have enough volume back up in there for the water to kind of go down in all the low spots, all the ditches before it starts impacting stuff, but still, it's if it gets above that, I'm thinking that it's going to be pretty bad.
Still want a tremendous improvement though.
It would be a very large chance. Yeah. On parts of that road, there's pretty much 100% chance you're going to get some type of flooding this program. So next slide. So we looked at, so we have all the drainage. So, from 21st to 41st, we looked at the entire pathway, which is essentially that red line there. And then we looked at all the drainage systems that are in there. and all the low spots along there and what we would have to do to make a, a complete project to protect everything within our study area to the level that 6.0 title. So again, Hillary mentioned some of those check valves, which our outfalls are, here, here, and here. Those are going to have check valves in them already, but we have all these outfalls down here that will not have check valves on them. So we don't want to have check valves here and then check valves here because the water is coming and going that way. So we're going to have to, we've designed or conceptually designed check valves for all these systems also. And then this yellow area, or the areas that see, an improved non-flooding condition, when, these areas would have flooded, up to the 6-foot elevation. If we had any time, this is the worst case, of course. But these areas are protected. Now, if we get 6.1, they get flooded.
And that's where you would expect if you had a ground level home, you would potentially see that coming into those homes or?
We don't have, we don't have access. We didn't have, access to like, elevation certificates or, elevations. I know there's some anecdotal, about people's houses that flood, and there's a couple houses that we do know that flood, and yeah, this would protect them up to a certain point. But still, again, in a hurricane, it's not going to be not going to protect against a hurricane.
Okay.
Next slide. So, we've developed some typical sections of what the project would be, and it's really, in a lot of places we're really not raising it. In a lot of places we're not raising it at all. We're actually just, there was a desire to make the path wider, of course, so it's going to go from a 5-foot to a 8-foot path. So, again, 3 feet. This one's showing a 1.5-foot expansion and just a little bit of raising. We have various what we call treatments. Is it raised? It might expand to that side. It might expand to this side. We have a series of these types of drawings in our proposed concept that we use to kind of visualize what we're doing. Next slide. And then we had a plan and a profile of the entire length, and then we colorize where each type of improvement has to be done, whether it's raising or not raising and whatever. So we laid that out, and then we identified where we came to different pipes that needed a check valve to make sure we control the tide from intruding across it in the pipe system. So we've identified all that. Next slide. Then we did a cost estimate on that plan. And it gets a little bit complicated down at the marina, a little more straightforward, from 21st to, I don't know, past 30th. But like when you get down to forest trails along the golf course there where it's really low, there's some issues that some of the considerations we had to do are not only intrusion, but local drainage. So if we were raising the path, some drainage comes off the road, goes over the path into a pond or another type of drainage facility. Now, if we raise the path, we essentially block that drainage. So we'd have to put in some new drainage to collect that drainage and get it to the other side. So we've made provisions for that. And then there's some more complications over, by the marina, the fire station. We actually have a small wall proposed for that area to again, kind of give us that encapsulated protection. We don't protect it all, none of it's any good. So we have to do it all. And then, again, we did the cost estimates, and then, again, you kind of see that it's pretty costly to get there.
Could you read those numbers for the record, please?
Okay, so with the contingency, the pathway elevation and widening was a $615,000 project. The pathway widening only is about a $132,000 project. So we're talking about 500,000 to bring it up, to that 6.0 rate.
And does that include the additional check valve
It does.
for all the way to 20th?
Well, yep, it does. Which I think it's like, those are generally smaller systems. And it's like 9 check valves.
And how much of that extra cost is the check valves? I'm sorry, I don't have it right.
Not a huge amount of the cost. It's probably 5 or 7% of the cost. Not a huge
It also doesn't include the soft cost either, right?
amount. It doesn't, but we generally feel that those contingency could absorb that soft cost. Design. I don't think we've identified any, well, there might be 1 or 2. We do need 1 or 2. For those for that localized drainage, and again, we would have to coordinate, it's more around the golf course area, we'd have to coordinate with Boston to kind of work that out. But again, everybody would have a nice passable Waterway Boulevard for the reporters. I think it'd be a positive for everybody.
So except for extreme events, this would largely eliminate the flooding that we commonly see occur when we have large rainfall on Waterway.
It's, yes, a little bit of both. Now, remember, one of the, we're having more problems is tidal intrusion. So, we're really trying to protect against the tidal intrusion. Now, the other drainage projects are the ones to solve all the drainage. So, the combination of what we've done with the 3 outfalls and this will give you a good protection from, drainage, rainfall-driven flooding and tidal-driven flooding.
Would you be interested in coming back and present this to Ways and Means Committee?
Sure.
We're just one small committee. And that's a big.
I understand that. Yeah, I welcome the opportunity to come back and dive into it deeper.
Yeah, that's where it all happens.
Right.
Great.
Any other questions or anything else on there?
No, I mean, I see a lot of value in all of this. We have been waiting a while to get the PAP issue repaved and fixed up. But if we could potentially see some extra value in, preventing significant collection of rainfall on Waterway, it could be worth it.
All right.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You mind if I just make a comment?
Of course not.
So I think there's kind of the thoughts about where we would go next from here on this project. And the staff's feeling on this is that within the next year, we expect to learn a lot of things. First of all, we borrowed this amount of money. We don't know exactly what those projects are going to cost. We still have kind of a wild card sitting out there with mitigation on the Outfalls project. We also have in the interim time this kind of island-wide study, which we expect that project to identify and kind of quantify the remaining problems that we have. So we think in about a year from now, we will have basically a hit list of projects, a price tag of projects, and the level of relief that each of those will provide. And I think that we were in the mindset that it would be wise to see where this would come in that hierarchy and see how much of the money gets spent on the outstanding projects. So that's kind of where we thought we would probably want to land in this, is just wait and learn more in the next year before we made a firm commitment to one direction or another. It's great information. It will certainly be rolled into the master planning project for drainage, but I think that's kind of what we're foreseeing.
So I have a couple, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
And one is that I think our city administrator mentioned that potential for grant funding is out there for projects like these?
Yes.
Right now, especially with these.
Rick alluded to, we don't have a lot of concrete data to go on damages that happen during these tides. And I think that we believe that if we had that, we would have a much higher success rate in getting grants. So this year would also give us time to kind of, we are aware of a couple, and we actually have been successful in getting a grant for one of them. And the amount of that grant, you know, would a large chunk of this project, if it were to go towards this project. The grant currently is in the 300,000 range. And it's for elevating one of the houses that's being damaged, but they've had problems with kind of finalizing that grant. FEMA's given them a little bit of a moving target. They approved it. Now they're kind of going back. So there's uncertainty on that. So, you know, more information, potentially more examples that we can direct towards, and that would help us in future grant applications.
So my huge concern is that we are so far overdue in fixing the waterway multi-use path. I mean, we're literally probably a decade behind of where we should be with fixing that path up. It's been at the forefront of one of the things that I thought we should be accomplishing since I joined the council almost 4 years ago. And that
Talked about the fact that, and Rick also mentioned that large parts of the path could be done at their current elevation and not have future issues with that project. So that's kind of we could do that. The other part of it we've talked about is the paving itself, you know, for that stretch. There is obviously an expense to that. But in the grand scale of kind of drainage projects, it would be inefficient to pave it once at a certain width and then come back 3 years later, widen it, elevate it, and pave it again. But that's something that we could opt to do that if we wanted to, just go ahead and do it, knowing that we may end up redoing it. But you know, I would hope that again in kind of a year we would have, and I don't know if it would be the will of the council to wait a year. But I do think that in a year, we would have a much clearer direction in terms of how likely this project is to move forward.
do you see a scenario where we would not want to do this project, or is it just a matter of where it falls in the hierarchy of priorities?
So that, to me, if I think this project kind of triggered from like the no-brainer, it's easy, just do it, to once, you see all of the costs that go into it at 600,000, I could see it being something that when you see all the other projects stacked up against it, that it may be something that gets pushed very much to the long range plan, especially if we go through the money that we borrowed quicker than we thought we would. I could see it being pushed out significantly and potentially not done.
And to be clear, I saw much more value in this when I saw significant potential protection for homes being flooded. And it sounds like from what I'm hearing, that's maybe not as much of a driver as I thought it was before.
I think there's some truth to that. We're not and I've been asked, where are the homes that this is protecting? We know of a couple. We kind of feel like there could be more, but we don't. It might just be more of a nuisance to those people than an actual problem of damage to their home. So again, we would be able to kind of collect information on that and have a closer eye on that if and when we have these events.
It's very good information. Very good. And a nice presentation. Thank you. Might be a while down the road. Might be getting here a lot faster than we think. We'll have to see. We're going to get an update on island-wide drainage master plan. Douglas?
So I don't have much to report on this other than we are in the process of getting out a request for proposals.
Okay.
We're kind of still doing that. It will be this month. It was supposed to be last month, but it will be shortly. It's basically ready to go. It's in draft format. It just needs to be put out. Planning Commission will do kind of an analysis and make a recommendation, and that'll come back to you all. Probably not at your next meeting, but the meeting after that.
Very good. Thank you. Next item is update on non-standard service fund eligible projects for fiscal years 22, 23, and 24. Y'all need to be here for a discussion of the change order on phase 3.
I'd like.
You would? Okay. It comes up right after this.
defense. Yeah.
Okay, it comes up right after this.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so for the non-standard service fund projects, myself, Desiree, and some representatives from Dominion Energy met last Friday virtually to discuss kind of what's going on with that. We started out talking about the Marina project, undergrounding out there, as council decided that would be the first thing that we do. The cost estimates currently are between 150 and 250,000 to underground lines from both Waterway Boulevard into the Marina, the main line and the feeder line that runs along the property line with Louise Ferry, and then undergrounding a span that runs into the neighborhood adjacent to 41st. That was sort of the main thrust of the conversation is what's it going to take to do that? What's the timeline look like for how we move forward with this? The next steps that we walked away with were that Dominion would evaluate a comprehensive scope of work. And that's for both the actual project itself and the engineering study, and include a lighting component, as we know that lighting at the Marina has been a concern recently. And then also determine relocation of the existing transformer that's down there, because that's going to have to move as we go into some of the undergrounding as well, just from a ground disturbance perspective. That area will have to be disturbed, so we'll have to move the transformer.
Good question. Did you say that you were also talking about doing the additional project on 41st?
So yes, there's a span that runs into a neighborhood adjacent to 41st, and that would be part of the undergrounding.
Was that, when it was presented to us, there were several options, and one was a separate option involving, I think.
Yes, that is a separate,
That's different.
that's a different kind of, yeah, so.
This is just where the Marina bumps up against 41st and that
Okay.
Correct.
area there.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's just that kind of like, looking at the map, I think it's like the southeast corner.
Mhm.
The trend, I'm sorry.
No, it's kind of like a L.
Like, yeah, it's like an
First
L shape.
L, or
Mhm.
depending on how you're looking. Okay.
The transformer you're speaking of, is that the one that's over near the restaurant, that area there?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I would have to look at the map to be sure, but I think it's also in that area with the kind of L-shaped undergrounding that's going to be occurring. So, but I know there was some discussion of power lines in that area.
Yeah, I think it's good for, as we discussed at our Ways and Means workshop or budget workshop, to go ahead and do that one, partly because we have some money that we kind of need to cycle through before we lose the opportunity to use it. So I think it makes sense to go with a bigger project at first.
Right. Yeah, and that was sort of where we came at this from in the earlier discussion, and so we kind of carried that forward into discussion with Dominion as well. So Dominion is going to be drafting an engineering study that it calls an other work in progress, and then we'll share that with the city once that's completed. We're trying to use these funds before the end of the year, but that might be a little bit too ambitious. We definitely couldn't complete the project by then. So it's likely that this will be rolled over into FY22 with the additional undergrounding projects following in 23 and 24.
Now, the other two are small. So I feel like they should be doable in 1 year. Like depending, we got bigger and smaller projects, so I would love to see us try to get the next two smaller projects done in 1 year if possible. I don't know how the other members feel about that.
Well, we're also, another part of the largest project was 41st and South, right?
But there were the two
The
small
two smaller
projects
ones, the one, yeah.
The 14th conversion and 21st,
The
yeah.
10th and the 14th.
And that was next up in our.
Right,
priority.
yeah, both of those are small, and if those could be done in 1 year, that would be
Yeah.
probably the way to go. Small in cost.
Mhm.
Yeah, plus by 23, we'll be looking at new projects for 24. So it's continually rolling on.
So I can certainly go back to Dominion with that sentiment, if that is the will of council.
And Councilmember Buchanan had brought up the possibility of steering our user fee that's tied to Dominion.
Mhm.
Is it user fee the right term?
You're talking about the franchise fee?
Franchise fee. Maybe directing that towards more undergrounding activities. I mean, I'm open to that conversation. We don't need to have that right now, but just to say that if we had that extra funding going, we could do a lot
It
more.
would definitely help. Yeah,
If we think we can do that much more,
definitely. The one thing that we should be concerned about around the marina is easement acquisition, and that other projects may not be necessarily as easement acquisition heavy, but just based on where this is, the fact that it butts up against several different lots, that will be a part of the project, and that could also delay the timeline.
Is some of it butt up against the Outfall project?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
And so that's pretty much the update here. So once the study is complete, the actual conversion work would take 6 months, maybe slightly less, but 6 months is kind of the safe estimate. Right now, that engineering study is sort of our main goal to accomplish.
Okay, very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you. Moving right along, new business. Item A, consideration of change order in the amount of $43,300 to Thomas and Hutton Contract for additional permitting. Douglas, or
aspect is, the second aspect is the original contract, since, when we start these jobs, we're 3 years ago and not really knowing where we're gonna end up in a lot of things. We could, attach, scopes and budgets to a lot of things, but sometimes you gotta say, hey, we don't know what's gonna happen, let's find out what's gonna happen, and then we'll tell you how much it costs. So in this case, we've got to this point where you pretty much know permitting, one way we could have handled
this mitigation permitting issue was. We could have said, let's just pay money to a bank. And there's mitigation banks, and that route is, in this case, the saltwater mitigation is extremely expensive. So to not have to go and pay that large fee, we're doing a little more effort on the mitigation design side, and that's going to be a less costly mitigation fee. So now we're at that point, we kind of know where we want to go. We want to go and get mitigation instead of paying into this bank. And so we're working through that now. And that's the second part of this change order request.
Why don't you come up with the number, percentage of the original?
No, we have a sub-consultant who's working with us on the permitting side. He's estimated, I got to do 10 hours to do this, a week to do that. I got to talk to these people. We got
Contingency on top.
a little contingency. We are working, again, this is not a lump sum number, so this is a time and expense. So we only bill you for what we do. If it comes in cheaper, it comes in cheaper.
Right, okay.
It is not a lump sum, so there's, again, we're not, we don't like to do any permitting work because we're not, that's something that's outside of our control.
Right.
You're dealing with, agencies and things like that. So we try to just weigh it, tell you what it is and try to work towards that.
Is there a recommendation to move this forward to Ways and Means for approval?
I'll make that recommendation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Your second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? There being none, all in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Thank you, sir. Okay, next item is B, consideration of replacement of 2003 Mack flatbed in the amount of $97,260. It's in the budget. I'm not going to bore you with the budget line item, but it comes from half from hospitality tax and the other half from state accommodations fund. Donnie, you anything to say about it that we need to know and talk us out of it?
No, I'm not gonna talk you out of it.
All right.
Got a 19-year-old truck that
I'm just
we're
kidding.
babysitting, but,
Turn a little blue there.
it's Blue Monday.
Yeah.
This truck, just so you know, it's a new style vehicle, but it mirrors the new flatbed that's on site right now. However, it is underweight class, which gives the city more versatility in the case we have an event and I want to put Ron on a flatbed without a CDL, we can handle that now. So it just gives us a little bit better option. We don't haul dirt, we haul in debris. It's not nearly as heavy. So it's a very good option for the city for what we do.
Okay, I'd like to remind the committee that it's in the budget. Is there a motion to move this to the Ways and Means for approval?
I'll make a motion.
I second it.
Is there any further discussion? Thank you, Donnie. There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, item C, consideration of fiscal year 22 CTC funding request of eligible new construction projects. Oh, that's about Ron.
Yep, so this is about seeking CTC funding for certain projects in the FY22 budget from the county.
Right.
This is a thing that we, I believe, historically have done.
Yeah.
And we basically be continuing to pursue those, what are essentially grant funds.
Don't we usually do this earlier in the year?
We do. I believe things were kind of pushed back due to COVID.
Okay. But we would still expect to hear by November whether we receive the funding?
I don't have the exact timeline in front of me, but that does sound about right, yes.
Okay, we've got a funding request for eligible new construction projects. Does city management have any suggestions for eligible new projects? Do we have any specifics at this time? Or will we take this up at Ways and Means?
We might need to take this up at Ways and Means. I don't have any specifics with
Okay.
me currently. I believe Desiree was working on a couple that just
Very good, that's all we need to know, thank you. Item D, discussion of creation of environmental advisory committee, we talked about this before. Susan, this is your ballgame, you want to give us a brief update about where it stands?
Right, well, I'm hoping that we can move forward with this and go ahead and make some progress, so we get it done, by the fall. And I believe we'll have to take several steps that would include going through some readings, ordinance readings. So just wanted to go ahead, and I think there was, we wanted to get some input from the strategic planning survey, and I think we got that with our stakeholder groups actually saying, verifying that this was important to them, protecting the environment. And it is a pivotal moment right now for, in several ways, the environment is at the forefront of several significant, we have several crises going on, both locally and globally, that include extreme weather and rising seas, as well as the plastic pollution crisis, among many other things. I just feel like this committee could help us go deeper and wider on topics that our council can't always get into, and would be an advisory committee, obviously by the name. It's not a dramatic difference. It's really maybe something we should have done a while ago, as many other municipalities have something like this in place. So I'd just like to go ahead and get it moving. I'd love to get your feedback.
Okay, well, we look forward to getting a mission statement and getting it through legal, figure out what we have to do, figure out what costs are involved, what is the purpose of it, where it's going to go, and give us some concrete parameters of where it's going to go in the timeline. And Rusty, you have any thoughts on that?
Well, weren't there some communities that were identified that had sort of a best practice
Right,
situation going with this
I
type
kind
of
of-
committee?
Yeah, I outlined previously, I don't think it's included in this packet,
Right.
just some recommendations for a 7-member appointed committee that, I get back to with some goals around, a set list of goals, and the ability for that committee to advise council in these areas generally, and as requested by council for feedback on special projects.
I may interject here. We opened conversations with Folly Beach previously at the end of last week. They have responded to us by email and set up a conversation for later in the week about what they're calling their Folly Green Team, which is it's not necessarily like a city organization. It started out as one sponsored by the city and then passed one off. They provided seed funding to it. Now it's sort of its own thing. But it's a local environmental action group kind of thing, which there's a number of different ways that we could go about doing this. It could be an appointed board, like you're talking about. It could be something like that. It could be, so we're exploring options definitely to move the ball down the field.
Perry, North Carolina was one that I saw that seemed like a good, it's, a 7-member committee. I don't know that it takes, that it's super complex, but I think it would be good if it met at least every other month or at least quarterly.
I'm with the chair. I think we want to put some structure around this, whether it be, the mission statement and, just our thoughts on how this would look, and maybe using, the model that Folly Beach is using and some others that have sort of,
Let's see
experience in
Let's
this.
see some stuff on paper.
Yeah.
Let's see some concrete goals, where we're going, how the city is involved.
Right.
Do you need money? What is it that you're looking for?
Well, I think, I point you back to the original proposal that I gave a couple of months ago when we first introduced this, I think could be a good guide or starting point for our conversation. I don't think it would cost very much money. We're talking about volunteers. And the other aspect of it is that it provides another way for citizens to be engaged. And we have a highly involved community, I think, that is eager for these kinds of opportunities.
Sounds good. Give us some concrete direction. We'll move along with that. Item E is something I discussed, and I really don't, and after I just talked to Susan about concrete direction, I don't have anything concrete to mention, except that I think this committee, I want to get the committee to keep involved, especially, and give them an idea on their thoughts, especially after the events of last Wednesday. Things kind of backed off after that, but I can't imagine what was in front of Councilman Streetman's house, but there was traffic in front of my house, my little house, after 8 o'clock. And, just zooming right through the stoplights and stop signs and everything.
Mhm.
I know public safety is probably doing anything and everything they can, and I'm just this is nothing formal, but I just wanted to let public know that we're very much aware of it. Any suggestions that committee members might have at this time or in the future would be greatly appreciated. We've got a problem on our hands, folks, a big problem. I just saw in the paper on last Sunday that some developers are building 15,000 houses in Berkeley County.
It's exponential growth, and it's also shoeboxing in hotels and condo complexes just across the connector.
Correct.
That, that all those people are being sold on being next to the beach.
You talk about environmental impact, Susan,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, I mean, we do need to, I think we're gonna have to come up with some out-of-the-box solutions on this, because we can only fit so many people on the island in terms of traffic. I personally, would be interested in how we can help the shuttle succeed and make that accessible. I mean, how do we get to a place where that is free for people so that they will actually use it? I don't know if that's something.
That's a very good point, and to me, it's a big problem. I was talking to one of our citizens, Dr. Smiley, the other day. How do you convince a family of 4 to spend $16?
Right,
Round trip?
right. When they could come and park for free, and they
Which
still.
we
have
are
to-
subsidized Florida to a great degree. That needs a lot more input, a lot more work, and we appreciate any help from council members to further that argument. It's like, we already pay.
Right.
We pay a lot.
And
How are you going to convince a young family of 2 small children to pay $16?
And it's to the benefit of the whole community.
Correct.
That they would have that opportunity to shuttle over. It really, I think that may be one of the immediate keys, and making sure that there's some kind of way to transport some of their gear with them safely, and streamline that somehow.
Any thoughts that you might have or you might hear from our citizens would be greatly appreciated, because I think you're correct, and that's the key to the future. One of the keys to the future.
Mhm.
Rusty?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I'm glad to see this as part of, on our agenda today. Really quite surprised when I did see it, because I'm thinking, okay, Public Works, and we're going to be discussing beach traffic and parking. But I do have a few thoughts around that. Some of them provided by residents of the island, and just some on my own as well. But I see this really as being a joint venture for not only public safety, Public Works, of course, Ways and Means, and ultimately council, that we all work together to try to find solutions for some of the things we're talking about. Because last week was really a big surprise for us. Even though it was spring break week, we knew it was going to be busy. To have the kind of traffic we had out here Wednesday was really an eye-opener for all of us. We're going to have many more days like that this summer. We all know that.
Mhm.
And also, I don't think, based on some of our discussions that we've had about parking and our parking issues we have right now, we really haven't, in our other committees and even our last special council meeting, we really didn't give it a lot of attention discussion-wise to talk about our parking issues. We had our first meeting on parking, and discussion, I'm sure, when we next bring that up. And of course, out here today, we have a lot of visitors out here today who are looking at angled parking, how we might accomplish that. So we've got all of that going on as well. And there's been a number of questions that have come up, I know from residents, about, that I've talked to about, okay, if we have angled parking, we all want to have safe parking. That's it, number one, safe parking. But for the residents, a lot of them have questions too. Okay, well, what happens if we do that? Where do I put my trash bins? How's that going to impact, public works, picking up my trash, my yard debris, that sort of thing? When we have clearly delineated marked parking, angled parking, do we encroach on that? It's all sort of a dilemma as to how that's going to look. Another thing, we all know the condition of Palm Boulevard, basically, 25th, 26th, right on up to 38th, where a lot of times on the land side, it's underwater. We have heavy rains. I mean, and then on the beach side too, in parts of it, but it really just becomes a swamp when we have the heavy rains, and we have those more frequently than we used to. So those are the kind of questions that we've got to ask ourselves too, and say, how do we get solutions for that? Because when we have those real rainy periods, that's going to cut down on the available parking and on those right of ways. And it's all questions that rightfully should be asked. Who does the maintenance on the new parking stalls? If and when we put in angled parking, who's going to maintain that? Would it be our public works, or would it be shared cost or SCDOT helping us with that? So we're not going to stop the traffic. The traffic's coming. I mean, the point's already been made that we have a lot of homes, in Charleston County, Berkeley County. People love this area. They're relocating from different parts of the country, and that's not going to slow down. So we've got to do our best to see what we can do to safely accommodate our residents, number one, and any visitors we have coming here also. And that's my thought.
Thank you. Well, very, very good thoughts. We need to maybe retool,
And to
Yes,
follow
ma'am.
up
Go
on
ahead.
a couple of those thoughts, I feel like we ought to be trying to accelerate this a reimagining of Palm Boulevard. We have space that we could use more productively and also incorporate more safely pedestrian pathways and bike lanes that we've all wanted for so long, but will require a large expenditure of money to consider. But maybe if we can reach out and work with the county, who clearly wants to have this opportunity for people to come here in a safe way, and the state, together we can find more financial backing for that project. Because clearly, municipality like Mount Pleasant, not only do their full-time residents come here to enjoy the beach, but also they're receiving their own accommodations revenue from the hotels that they've allowed to be built that are also coming to the beach. There should be some shared responsibility, I think, amongst the different groups.
all I can say is let's stay on it. Let's be proactive. I appreciate everybody's comments. Thank you. And with your permission, with the committee's permission, I'd like to leave this on the agenda for future meetings. And maybe let's see what we can do. I found out all my years here, unless you push something, it gets pushed aside.
Well, and I have two thoughts that are more related to clearly public safety related issues.
Oh, here she is.
Oh, maybe we can get an update. But one is, and I've heard our city administrator mention the possibility of putting up speed limit signs on the cross streets, partly because of when people are cutting through between Palm and Waterways, speeding around, they don't know what the speed limit is, and you may not care, but maybe a reminder at this point would be in order with the amount of traffic we're seeing.
On the avenues, Partners,
Yeah, like
camera.
the numbered avenues.
Right.
And then the other is that if we could maybe encourage people who live on the island, especially those on the other end of Wild Dunes, to use Waterway Boulevard instead of Palm Boulevard during the season, it might help alleviate some of the traffic on Palm Boulevard, some of the clogging that happens on Palm Boulevard. Waterway is usually a much more open artery in general, and it can help with safety if we just remove some of the numbers. If Wild Dunes could ask its guests to use Waterway, perhaps.
Well, we'll have to think about that one. People on Waterway probably
Yeah,
will have something to say.
the people on Waterway may not be thrilled about that.
Well, that's the
However,
reason they bought on Waterway.
Well,
true, that's true.
right, and another issue on Waterway too, let's face it, there's much more pedestrian activity on Waterway.
Yeah.
Children on bicycles, moms pushing the baby
That is
carriages,
true.
that sort of thing. So
Dog
that,
That's true.
that really, it could pose an additional safety
Yeah.
hazard if we encourage a lot of that. So I think we just try to find solutions. We've only got 2 ways on and off this island, no matter what you do. I mean, you either gotta go across Sullivan's Island or you gotta take the connector here. So,
Right.
we've got to try to find solutions within those boundaries.
It's not on the update, I'm sure, I mean, it's not on the agenda, a report from the city administrator, but I'm sure we're all, would love to hear what she has to say. Unfortunately, it's gonna have to happen outside the meeting. I don't wanna drop any bombshells. We know where you've been.
Well, I'll go, I plan on, I just returned back from, almost a 3 or 4 hour meeting with the SCDOT team. We had a chair of public safety there with us all, throughout the whole time. We also had several residents that we met individually with, Secretary Hall and her team. Chief Cornett was with me as well. We went through, a lot of iterations of parking and, agreed on some adjustments on the ground that I think will be very successful. So I will be sending all of you today more information about what transpired during the meeting, and then some documentation also for review prior to a special meeting of council later this week.
Well, actually, legally, we do have an item that says discussion of traffic, beach traffic and parking.
So we'll just put that. Well, you all recall that we had talked about, we've been working.
Desiree, you don't have to do it. I know you're worn out and everything. I know you have an awful lot to tell us. You were down there 3 or 4 hours. I'll leave it up to you. If you want to give us a brief update, that's fine.
So just a brief, we talked about the angle parking. We had several large vehicles there to test out the backing out of each parking space, each delineated parking space, to ensure that there's enough space between the end of a vehicle and the edge of the pavement for a vehicle to pull in safely without pulling onto Palm Boulevard. We tested that. We decided to move further up the potential parking, the parking curb at the front to allow more clearance at the back, and also
Closer to the sidewalk.
closer to the sidewalk. So you'd still be about 3 feet. The end of the vehicle would be about 3 feet from the outermost edge of the sidewalk, and making each parking space wider. So rather than 9 feet, go to 10 feet, and that would give a little bit more maneuverability and more room for pedestrians and exiting materials from their vehicle, beach chair, umbrellas, and all that kind of stuff. So we tested different scenarios. I feel like at the end of the day, everybody felt comfortable with where we were. I have some videos that I will share with you all for those that were not in attendance. The DOT team did make themselves available between now and the next meeting of council where you'll be considering second reading of an ordinance for an in-person on-site meeting. If that's something that any of you would be interested in, let me know and we can get that scheduled for either Wednesday or Thursday. So a lot of good conversation. The DOT team was able to.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. That first mattress right there, if the other committee members or the majority had any time, when you say next Wednesday or Thursday?
No, this week.
Do you have any time? You want to do it?
And we can do that after, we can do that offline. I can schedule that
Okay,
with each
go ahead.
of you because we can't make a quorum on site. So that'll be just a logistical, component that we'll handle. So I'll communicate with each of you directly.
Oh, I see, okay. All right, very good.
Thank you.
You don't look too beat up.
Well, thank you.
Miscellaneous business, the next meeting date will be at 4:30 PM on Wednesday, May 5th. There's no reason for executive session. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all very much.